from the rain and the stone, where the wind has no name and the traveler's alone. There's warmth in the fire and truth in the tale of the watcher who walks where the bold-hearted fail. He carries no sword, yet the darkness gives way to the lantern he lifts at the end of the day. He stands on the Watchtower, still and unswayed, where the lost find a path through the fog and the fray. Pilgrimsgrey, oh steward of lands, you carry the light in your weather-worn hands. A tale at the hearth, a guide through the night. You open the gate between the wrong and the right.
Yes, Monday night, Steward of Lands. Pilgrimsgrey Chronicles, Robert Clark, your host. Well, the fire's warm and the shadows are stretching, and the old road winds up toward a hill that's more than just a rock and dust. And tonight, fellow wanderers, we're climbing Zion. Welcome back to Pilgrimsgrey Chronicles, where prophecy isn't theory, giants are real, and the Watchers haven't given up their thrones just yet. And tonight, we're doing something a little different. We'll be reading through a sharp and timely article by our friend and fellow Mount Watcher, Derek Gilbert, titled Armageddon, War for the Mount. If you know Derek's work from Giants, Gods, and Dragons to the Second Coming of Saturn, then you already know this won't be a soft ride through Sunday school. This is sword-drawn, boots-only, holy ground theology. Not the kind of felt stuff, stick-on stuff that you get in Sunday school class. And then, well, you know us. We'll break it down. We'll pull in more scripture, and we'll shine a lantern onto the corners of this unfolding war over God's holy mountain. Because that's what Armageddon is really about. Not Megiddo, not some abstract apocalypse, but the final assault on Zion, the Mount of Assembly, the throne of the King. So if you drink coffee, pour some, sharpen your blade, and let's take a walk to the mountain the enemy still wants and the King is coming back to claim. Again, this is Pilgrimsgrey Chronicles. Let's get started. We'll jump right into Derek's article and start with the very first paragraph. The long war by the fallen against their creator is for control of God's Har Moed, his Mount of Assembly, Zion. That's his prize jewel, and that's why Saturn wants it. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised in the city of our God. His holy mountain, beautiful in elevation, is the joy of all the earth, Mount Zion in the far north, the city of the great King. Psalm 48, 1-2. So you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who dwells in Zion, my holy mountain, and Jerusalem shall be holy, and strangers shall never again pass through it. Joel 3:17. For the Lord has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his dwelling place. This is my resting place forever. Here I will dwell, and I have desired it. Psalm 132, 13, 14. So, plenty of other verses support this idea, but you get the point. God's holy mountain, his Mount of Assembly, is Zion, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Yes, some believe Solomon's temple was in the city of David, south of the Temple Mount. There are a number of reasons, including recent archaeological excavations in the city of David at the alternate location proposed for the temple that undercut this theory. The most obvious bit of evidence is the testimony of first-century Jewish historian Josephus, who wrote that the platform supporting the temple measured 500 cubits square. That is roughly 100 feet wider than the city of David, which sits on a small, narrow hill south of the Temple Mount. Now, had the platform been there, it would have hung out over the Kidron Valley, which is a bad design, to say the least. Now, placing Armageddon at Jerusalem makes the most sense from a spiritual standpoint. It is the home of God's Mount of Assembly. Besides, other apocalyptic prophecies in the Old Testament point to Jerusalem at the site of the final showdown between good and evil. The oracle of the word of the Lord concerning Israel Thus declares the Lord, who stretched out the heavens and founded the earth and formed the spirit of man within him. Behold, I am about to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to all the surrounding peoples. The siege of Jerusalem will also be against Judah. On that day, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it. And on that day, I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. Zechariah 12, 1-3, 9, emphasis added by my lips. Just kidding. It's highlighted in the article. I guess I should have read it louder or something, right? Anyway, to continue, for I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses plundered, and the women raped. Half of the city shall go out into exile, but the rest of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as when he fights on a day of battle. And on that day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall split in two from east to west by a very wide valley, so that one half of the mountain shall move northward and the other half southward. And you shall flee to the valley of my mountain, for the valley of the mountains shall reach to Azael, and you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. Zechariah 14, 2-5, emphasis added. For behold, in those days and at that time when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my heritage, Israel, because they have scattered them among the nations and have divided up my land. Joel 3, 1-2. So, the phrase on that day, and by the way, I emphasize a very wide valley intentionally because of the SLS folk. Because there is somebody out there claiming that they claim they filled in the crack caused by the earthquake, or the Lord setting upon the Mount of Olives, and it did split, and they just filled it in to hide it or whatever. But it's pretty clear by the language used in the Old Testament that that's ridiculous. It's a huge valley capable of many of the people of the nation of Israel going down into that valley for protection. I don't even know why I give it the time of day any longer. Anyway, to continue with the article, the phrase on that day refers to the day of Yahweh, or day of the Lord, the time of God's judgment against a rebellious and unbelieving world. Zechariah and Joel saw the same final battle as Ezekiel. God personally intervenes to destroy the army assembled against Israel. That's the second coming, the return of Messiah. When he arrives, again, the Mount of Olives splits into, creating a very wide valley. This is probably the valley of Jehoshaphat mentioned by Joel. This valley does not exist on any known map, at least it doesn't exist today. The name of the valley is not a reference to the king of Judah during the days of Ahab. Jehoshaphat's name means Yahweh will judge. So the valley of Jehoshaphat is literally the valley of Yahweh's judgment. That's where the Battle of Armageddon ends, between the west slope of the Mount of Olives and the eastern gate of Jerusalem, through which the Messiah will triumphantly enter his city once again. So the location is not random. As mentioned in an earlier article, this is probably where David buried the head of Goliath, thus turning the Rosh, head or summit, of the Mount of Olives into Golgotha, Goliath's head, the site of the crucifixion. It's where an Ammonite princess convinced King Solomon to build a high place for the king god Milcom, another name for El, one of the many identities worn by this entity over the centuries. Our Lord used this mount as his base of operations for the final week of his human life. Christ was buried on the Mount of Olives, descended from there to the abyss to declare his victory over the imprisoned rebels, and was taken from there up into the heaven. And Zechariah was prophesied that when he returns, the Messiah will land there, at the Mount of Olives. Now, if you've studied end times prophecy at all, you've probably been taught that Armageddon will be fought at Megiddo, not Jerusalem. It's a popular teaching, but it's based on the difficulty of transliterating from Hebrew to Greek to English. As famous as it is, the name Armageddon is found in only one verse in the entire Bible, and this is it. The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. And I saw, coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits, like frogs. For they are demonic spirits, performing signs, who go abroad to the kings of the whole world, to assemble them for battle on the great day of God the Almighty. Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake, keeping his garments on, that he may not go about naked and be seen exposed. And they assembled them at the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. Revelation 16:12 through 16. Now, John used slightly different terminology to describe the day of the Lord, but the great day of God the Almighty clearly refers to the same event described by Zechariah and Amos. It's the same battle described by Ezekiel in chapters 38 and 39 of his book, about which we'll have more in an upcoming article. So I look forward to that. Thank you, Derek. And so English speakers trying to decipher the Hebrew words behind Armageddon concluded that it's a compound name based on the Hebrew Armageddon or Mount Megiddo, where the on suffix indicates a place name. In fact, several English translations, such as the NASB and RSV, which I kind of like, and ASV, he didn't say that, I did, render the name either Armageddon or Armageddon. And so this has convinced respected prophecy teachers like Chuck Missler, who I respect, Dwight Pentecost, John Woolford, and Arnold Fruchtenbaum, to place Armageddon near the city of Megiddo in the valley of Jezreel. And then he has a map in the article, which is really kind of cool. And then article continues. To be fair, that's a logical conclusion from a military standpoint. Megiddo overlooks the valley, which connects the Jordan Valley to the Mediterranean, and it guards a key pass through the Carmel mountain range. Several decisive battles were fought at or near Megiddo. In the 15th century BC, a little more than a decade before the Exodus, Pharaoh Thutmose III defeated a confederation of Canaanite city-states there. And in 609 BC, Judah's king, Josiah, was killed in battle at Megiddo against Pharaoh Necho, who was leading an Egyptian force north to fight alongside the remnant of the Assyrian army against the rising power in the Near East, the Chaldean kingdom of Babylon. Now, things went badly for Hosea, who was killed by an Egyptian archer, and despite his efforts, less than 25 years later, Nebuchadnezzar's army sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. Some gratitude. But with all due respect to the prophecy scholars named above, whose teachings I value highly, placing Armageddon at Megiddo just does not fit. First of all, there's no mountain at Megiddo. The ancient site of Megiddo is elevated above the plain, yes, but it's not a mountain. It's a tell, a mound created when people build and rebuild a settlement over centuries on the same spot. Second, it's unlikely that God would descend on the Mount of Olives when the armies of the world led by the Antichrist are 50 miles away at Megiddo. Most important, a battle at Megiddo doesn't fit the apocalyptic prophecies of Zechariah, Joel, and Ezekiel, and Jesus himself, all of whom pointed to Jerusalem as the site of the climactic battle. So the problem of identification comes from the difficulty in transliterating from Hebrew to Greek. In 1938, scholar Charles C. Torrey proposed a solution. Armageddon is based not on Armageddon, the name of the non-existent mountain, but on a phrase we've used throughout this book, Har Moed, the Mount of Assembly. In Isaiah 14, 12 through 13, fairly famous verse, it says, "How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn! How you are cut down to the ground! You laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the Mount of Assembly, Har Moed, and the far reaches of the north. Yarket, Zephon, Mount Zephon, the mount sacred to Baal." So Torrey argued that scholars who weren't experts in Greek and Hebrew missed the fact that Hebrew character ayin transliterated into English with the character, sort of a reverse apostrophe, was usually represented in Greek by the letter gamma. This is only an approximation because there is no letter or sound in Greek that corresponds to ayin. And that's spelled A-Y-I-N, for those wondering. Likewise, there's no corresponding sound or letter in English for ayin either. In modern Hebrew, ayin is vocalized as a glottal stop. Glottal stop? Well, forgive my mispronunciations. So when John wrote Revelation, he transliterated the Hebrew mim ayin dalith into the closest Greek approximation, mu gamma delta, MGD. When it should have been M apostrophe D. So Torrey's point was that those who were unaware of the difficulty of transliterating the ayin into Greek, and more importantly, the critical role of the Har Moed, Mount of Assembly, in Hebrew theology, assumed that John's gamma represented the Hebrew Gimel, and concluded the original Hebrew name must have been Mim Gimel Daleth, instead of Mim Ayin Daleth. Thus, Moed became Mageddon, and the Battle of Armageddon was transplanted from Mount Zion in Jerusalem to Megiddo, a place of no supernatural significance where no mountain exists. Now make no mistake, Armageddon is the battle for control of the Har Moed, Zion, God's mountain of assembly. The final conflict of the age will be fought at Jerusalem. So, that is the end of that article, but I have like 9 comments on it that I thought about while reading it that I want to share with you, because otherwise our show would only be 20 minutes tonight. So he offers some references. For instance, I should read through them because some of them are kind of important. The first reference is to a book, The Greatest Archaeological Blunder of All Time by Gordon W. Franz. If I can find it, I'll put it in as something that you can purchase as one of the products. I'm also going to recommend Derek's books in the video on YouTube if you want to click on it. And then second note, where he says Ezekiel 39:11 locates the destruction of the army of Gog, the Antichrist, in the Valley of the Travelers, east of the sea. And he says, I explained why that refers to the plains of Moab, the Jordan Valley between Mount Nebo and Jericho, in my book, Last Clash of the Titans, which if you've not read, I've watched the movies in regards to these things, and honestly, I'd much rather read Derek's book. I find it every bit as interesting and fascinating as watching those movies. And then Luke 21:20-24, Jesus' prophecy of the destruction of Jerusalem is an example of an already but not yet prophecy fulfillment. The city was destroyed in AD 70 by the Romans, but it also refers to the tribulation before his second coming. So, I hope you enjoyed the article. Now, let's take a step back and consider what's really going on beneath the headlines, beneath the history books, beneath the battlefield smoke. What Derek laid out so well is that Armageddon isn't just about a war. It's about the mountain. The real war is over rulership. Who gets to sit on the throne atop Mount Zion, the true Mount of Assembly? And you can almost hear the echo from Psalm 48, right? Reverberating across time. Beautiful for elevation. The joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion, the city of the great king. That's the mountain the enemy wants. That's the mountain he has always wanted. Not the plain of Megiddo, not some remote plain, but Zion, the heartbeat of God's redemptive plan. And make no mistake, this is not a new obsession. It goes back to Eden. And even before, the fallen sons of God have always wanted to usurp the Most High. You see it in Isaiah 14. You see it in Ezekiel 28. You see it at Babel over and over and over again. Their goal is the same. My whole channel is about this war between the little g gods and Yahweh. Gather the nations, unite the rebellion, and take the mountain. So tonight, we're going to build on what Derek showed us and trace this long war forward from the ancient rebellion on the Holy Mountain to the final siege of Jerusalem, described by Zechariah, Joel, and John. Because if we understand what's at stake, we'll stop looking for surface-level geopolitical signals and start looking at the mountain, right? So, let's now trace the battle line back to its origins. Before tanks, before Rome, before even Eden, because the War of Zion didn't begin in the valley of Jezreel, it began in the heavens. The core of the conflict isn't human history, but divine geography, the Mount of Assembly. Earlier we read Isaiah 14:12. The I wills. I will set my throne. I will sit on the mount, right? I will ascend above. I will make myself like the Most High. I find it interesting that he says, like, not I will make myself the Most High. I think he even knows he can't replace him. But the Hebrew phrase, Harmoed, Mount of Assembly, is the same term John uses in Revelation 16, disguised as Armageddon. It's not a mountain made of dirt. It's a place of divine authority where the Most High sits enthroned. This is the place the enemy wants. This is where the rebellion began, not to destroy God, which I'm certain they know they can't do, but to replace him. Perhaps by some legal trickery, because God honors the rules, right? They don't, to a great degree. I think they do out of fear, but certainly not out of any moral imperative. So the far reaches of the north links to Mount Zaphon, the divine mountain of Baal, a counterfeit of God's mountain in the ancient world. Every god had a mountain, right? Pretty much. Maybe not all of them, but many did. And to rule the mountain meant to rule the cosmos. In Ezekiel 28:12-17, we have the fall from Eden's holy mountain, right? It says, you were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. You were an anointed guardian cherub. I placed you. You were on the holy mountain of God. In the midst of the stones of fire you walk. Your heart was proud because of your beauty. I cast you to the ground. I exposed you before kings. So here's what many overlook. Eden was also a mountain, God's mountain. His cosmic temple was not just in heaven, but mirrored on earth. The cherub, the fallen guardian of that holy mountain, was cast out because of pride and rebellion. This establishes a biblical pattern. Wherever God sets his name, the enemy seeks to take it. Right? Genesis 11:4. Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. The Tower of Babel wasn't just about height. It was a ziggurat, an artificial mountain, a counterfeit Harmoed, a man-made path to divine power. The very act of gathering the nations in one place was a foreshadowing of Armageddon, except it was man uniting in rebellion, not submission. So God's response, disinherit the nations, Deuteronomy 13:8-9, confuse their language, and set the stage for the long, long seed war to play out until one seed would take back that mountain. And the final conflict, it won't happen in some forgotten valley. It'll happen on the mountain that started it all, Zion. So, number 3. Remember I had 9. I'm on the third one now. I guess I should have been more clear about that. Yes, number 3. While Derek rightly identified the Mount of Olives as the location of Messiah's return, Zechariah 14, let's build on this with a deeper look at its prophetic weight, historical echoes, and spiritual geography. So the prophetic bullseye, Zechariah 14, which we've read, it's the one about him splitting the mountain in two in a big valley. It's not symbolic, right? It's geographic prophecy. The very place where Jesus ascended, Acts 1, 9 through 12, is the very place he will return. And what follows is not vague. A massive tectonic split creates a valley, a wide, gaping valley. People flee into and through it, and God himself fights for Jerusalem. This is not the symbolic language of a past event. It is earth-shaking, sky-splitting, end-of-age intervention, and only one spot on earth qualifies: the Mount of Olives, not the plain of Megiddo. And in Acts 1:11, this same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven. Well, where did he go up? The Mount of Olives. How will he return? In like manner. It's deliberate symmetry. His departure was public, visible, and localized. So too will be his return. And not mystical, not spiritualized. He'll be entering into literal geography. And this echoes Zechariah 14, proving the apostles believed in a physical second coming to Jerusalem, not just a spiritual presence in the heart or symbolic reign, as many amillennialists believe. And so, the glory returns where it departed, right? Ezekiel 11. The glory of the Lord went up from within the city and stopped above the mountain east of it. Ezekiel 11:23. That mountain, that's right, the Mount of Olives. Ezekiel saw the Shekinah glory depart from the temple during Israel's apostasy and exile and wait above the Mount of Olives. So what happens when Christ returns? That same glory returns right where it paused. There's, again, some deep prophetic symmetry between the glory leaving from the east, right, in Ezekiel, Christ ascending from the same mount, Acts, and the king returning to wage war from it in Zechariah. It's, again, not random. It's not allegorical. The Mount of Olives is the cosmic fulcrum between exile and redemption, departure, and return. Well, why not Megiddo? As Derek noted, Megiddo is a real valley with real history, but it is not a mountain and has zero biblical mention as the place of God's final return. There's no Shekinah glory there. There's no ascension there. There's no prophecy that says his feet will stand on Megiddo or on a plain. Only Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives match the prophetic requirements. And then, if you look at the spiritual warfare geography, the battle is not about terrain, it's about claiming God's throne mountain. Armageddon isn't where the Antichrist has strategic advantage, it's where he makes his final spiritual claim. He comes to Zion to sit on the Mount of Assembly, to defy Psalm 2, to try and unseat the true king, right? Psalm 2:6, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. And Yahweh laughs, right? So, if the king is coming back to reign from Zion, then it only makes sense that the final war is fought at her gates. Armageddon, again, is not about geography, it's about God's throne. So, in a sense, it is both. But the primary prize is the throne. So, section 4, or note 4, I made some notes about Zechariah, Joel, Ezekiel, and John, all agreeing. Saying, I wrote down, if you still have any lingering doubt about the location of Armageddon, you don't need to rely solely on geography or transliteration quirks. Not that I'm saying it's just a quirk, but it was an error, as Derek pointed out. Scripture itself plainly tells us where the last stand happens. So let's listen to the prophets Zechariah, Joel, Ezekiel, and John, and you'll see they are pointing to the same ground, Jerusalem. So Derek already quoted this, Zechariah 12, where Jerusalem is a cup of staggering to all the surrounding peoples. The siege of where Jerusalem will also be against Judah. On that day, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all people. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it. And on that day, I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. Pretty sure Jerusalem's not in the plain of Megiddo. So it's not a metaphor. It's a mass mobilization against Jerusalem, right? Not Megiddo, not Tel Aviv, not some allegorical battlefield. It's Jerusalem. that becomes the heavy stone, the place the nations stumble over, and Yahweh himself declares he will destroy those nations. And then I won't reread this because we've gone over it a number of times about the valley, Zechariah, right? But that gives us even more detail of the moment of the Messiah's return. And that valley formed when Christ's feet touches the mount has no current counterpart. It's not on any present-day map and has never historically ever been written about ever in history, which is why when you combine that with everything, living thing, and the seed dying, and many other reasons, I don't buy into Satan's little season. This matches the Valley of Jehoshaphat described in Joel 3, which isn't named after a location, but rather after its meaning, as Derek pointed out, right? Yahweh judges. Joel 3, 1 and 2. For behold, in those days and at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the Valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there. And then Joel 3:12, let the nations stir themselves up and come up to the Valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. And then Joel 3:17, so you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who dwells in Zion, my holy mountain, and Jerusalem shall be holy, and strangers shall never again pass through it. It's consistent, it's unified, and it's crystal clear Jerusalem is the center stage of the final conflict. And then we have Ezekiel 38 and 39, the Gog-Magog war, and while Ezekiel doesn't name Jerusalem explicitly, the destruction takes place east of the sea in what he calls the Valley of Travelers, right? On that day I will give to Gog a place for burial in Israel, the Valley of the Travelers east of the sea, and it will block the travelers, for there Gog and all his multitude will be buried. As Derek has argued elsewhere, this refers to the plains of Moab just across from Jericho and in full view of what mountain? That's right, Zion, right within marching distance of Jerusalem. That whole region becomes the Valley of Final Judgment. And lastly, we return to Revelation 16, where John tells us the kings of the earth are summoned by unclean spirits to war, not against each other, but against God. They are demonic spirits performing signs who go abroad to the kings of the whole world to assemble them for battle on the great day of God the Almighty, and they assemble them at the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. But as we've already seen, Armageddon, or Har Moed, doesn't point to Mount Megiddo. It points to Mount Zion, the mountain where God dwells, and where every prophet we've just read says the final showdown takes place. So the verdict is in. The prophets don't disagree. There's no confusion. The final war is not about oil fields or regional conflicts or even politics. It's a cosmic war for Zion, for the Mount of Assembly, for the place where Yahweh said, this is my resting place forever. Here I will dwell, for I have desired it. That is Psalm 132:14. And that's why the enemy wants it. Okay. Note number 5, confirming with Jesus and the apostles, the end game is Jerusalem. If there were any chance to reinterpret the prophets metaphorically or misplace the location of the final conflict, the New Testament slams the door shut. Jesus himself and the apostles who followed him don't shift the target, they double down on Jerusalem. So, well, let's begin with Jesus' words in Luke 21, part of his famous Olivet Discourse. Same mountain, by the way, discourse. So, Luke 21, 20 and 22. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you know that its desolation has come near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountain, and let those who are inside the city depart, and let not those who are out in the country enter it, for these are days of vengeance to fulfill all that is written. No mention of Megiddo. Just mountains, and flee. And there's no pivot to Babylon or New York or Rome. Jesus roots the end-time tribulation in a surrounded Jerusalem, a siege, desolation, and a warning to flee, not fight. Then in Matthew 24, he builds on the same framework. Matthew 24, 15 and 16. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, Let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Where's that holy place? Well, of course, it's in Jerusalem, and it triggers the Great Tribulation, the great part, the last 3.5 years. And Jesus isn't speculating or allegorizing. He's referencing Daniel, affirming the geographic and prophetic center, Jerusalem, in the Mount of Olives, or Mount Olivet. So now we jump to Acts 1. The risen Christ is about to ascend into heaven from the Mount of Olives, but the angel's message is what anchors our hope. Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into heaven? This Jesus who was taken up from, well, I guess it would be kind of understandable, right? Dude ascends, and God himself in the flesh ascends into heaven. I might kind of stare for a while too. But, so this Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven. Then they returned to Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet. Again, not poetic metaphor, it's geographical promise. The same mountain he left from is the one he will physically return to in full sight of everyone. All eyes will see him, the one who was pierced. So the Mount of Olives, just east of the Temple Mount. That ties directly, again, to our favorite Zechariah 14:4 verse, right? Where his feet stand on the Mount of Olives. Then there's the Apostle John, right? Exiled on Patmos, receiving the revelation, echoing the same in Revelation 11. Then I was given a measuring rod, like a staff, and I was told, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there, but do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out, for it is given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. So, the holy city is not allegorical either. We all know where it is. It is Jerusalem. The nations will trample it for 3.5 years, matching Daniel's and Jesus' timeline. And then we have a look ahead to Revelation 14, when the Lamb stands in victory, right? Then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. Where is the Lamb standing? Not in the clouds, not in spiritual heaven, not on some new earth replacement location. He is standing literally, geographically, in Jerusalem on Mount Zion with his redeemed remnant. So, Jesus warned of it, the apostles confirmed it, Revelation seals it, the consistent witness of the New Testament, even in harmony with the Old Testament prophets, is this: Jerusalem is the battlefield, Zion is the goal, and the Mount of Olives is the landing zone. No mountains need to rise out of Megiddo. No symbolic gymnastics are required. The plain reading of Scripture, beginning to end, full counsel places the final showdown where it all began, the city of the great king. And then note number 6, the mountain is more than a location. It's the legal seat of dominion. So far we've shown that the Battle of Armageddon centers around Zion, not Megiddo, but we need to ask the deeper question. Why does the enemy care so much about this one mountain? Well, the answer goes beyond real estate. Zion is the legal throne of God's authority on earth. It is the place where the law went forth. It's where the temple stood. It's where the Messiah was crucified, and where he will return in power. But there's another layer. Isaiah 14, I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. Lucifer's rebellion. That phrase, Mount of the Congregation, is Harmoed, God's mountain council chamber, the place of divine government. In other words, Satan's rebellion wasn't just about pride. It was a hostile takeover, attempt of God's ruling seat. Zion is not just his mountain, it's his command center and the divine council structure. So when the Antichrist, or false Jesus Messiah, sets up his camp in Daniel 11:45 between the sea and the glorious holy mountain, it's not because he likes the view, it's because he knows this is the place of judgment and rulership. Right? Because I believe he'll be more than human. He'll have this knowledge. So this makes Psalm 2 kind of come alive with fresh clarity, right? The kings of the earth set themselves against the Lord and against his anointed. They rage because they know Zion represents a change in government, a legal restoration of dominion to the rightful king. who has just opened 6 seals of a title deed, right? So even Hebrews 12:22 reminds believers that when we align with Christ, we don't come to Sinai, the mount of fear and trembling, but to Mount Zion, right? The city of the living God, where angels assemble for war and worship. This isn't just end-time geography, it's end-time legality. But it's both, right? And legality matters. Apparently very much so in the spiritual hierarchy, the unseen realm. So, again, the enemy doesn't just care about hills. He cares about thrones. Zion isn't just a holy mountain. It's the legal seat of God's reign on earth. Well, that's why the battle must happen there and nowhere else. And then 7. We're getting close to the end here, folks, so hang in there. 7. The spiritual context. Why the mountain matters to the powers. So, again, it isn't, I may have made it sound like it's a turf war, but it's not just a turf war. This is a cosmic mutiny that has raged since human history can recall, right? When Revelation says the kings of the earth are gathered for battle, we often picture modern military, politicians, and yes, they're involved, but behind them are older forces, right? Powers, principalities, ancient grudges, the kind that delay angels upwards of 21 days of getting to Daniel for help. Ephesians 6:12, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. You know the verse, right? So behind these earthly kings, like the king of Tyre, the prince of Persia, lies a supernatural coalition, principalities, and I'm not just saying that they only operate in the spiritual realm. It's clear they can come in whatever form they want, apparently, but mostly human. Principalities, powers, and rebel sons of God, all arrayed against the Lord's return, and what unites them? One obsession, dethroning Yahweh by reclaiming the Mount of Assembly. And, in their own way, building back better, right? Because they know better, of course. Or they wouldn't be doing this, right? If they didn't think they had a better plan for man to remake them in what they want rather than Yahweh and all of creation, we wouldn't be going through all this, right? I mean, we've already been through one massive global reset, the flood, where they tried to do this on a massive scale, and God is restraining their lawlessness currently, or they would probably just outright do it again and again until they're finally stopped and tossed into a lake of fire. So, Harmoed versus Sephon, the battle of cosmic geography. In Ugaritic text, the high god El ruled from Mount Zaphon, the cosmic mountain of the gods. Baal, too, claimed this divine seat. When Isaiah 14 describes the fallen rebel's boast, I will ascend above the stars, and I will sit on the Mount of Assembly in the sides of the north. It's not random poetry. It's a direct spiritual challenge to Yahweh's rule from the true mountain, his true mountain, Yahweh's, Zion. It's why Armageddon cannot be reduced to a modern political conflict between Israel and some global coalition. It's the final campaign in a heavenly rebellion, right, that also has its physical counterpart on earth, a war of thrones and dominion. The fallen ones don't just hate mankind, they covet the authority we were given, right? To me, that's what the prodigal son is about, right? And they will still seek to seize the place where God placed his name. Psalm 82, the judge rises. Psalm 82 paints this drama vividly. God has taken his place in the divine council. He judges among the gods. Psalm 82:1. He calls the rebellious gods to account for ruling wickedly, and then he declares their end. You will die like men and fall like one of the princes. And that courtroom declaration ends in war, and Armageddon is where the gavel drops. In Daniel 7, we see thrones set in place, books open, Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. He takes dominion from the beasts, world empire, but also the spirits behind them, and gives it to the saints. This is the true endgame. Zion is not just a battlefield, it's the divine courtroom where all claims of rulership will be judged, and those who demanded to sit on the Mount of Assembly will finally be cast down from it. And it's almost like King of the Mountain, right? I remember in Michigan playing that in our schoolyard where they pushed the snow up in the parking lot into a hill so big, that it was a blast playing King of the Mountain. So the final battle isn't about borders, it's about dominion. The fallen powers still believe they can ascend to the throne of God. And I think part of their plan is using us. But Zion is where the king will be enthroned forever and where their rebellion will be crushed. And then the note I took, number 8, present tensions. Today's headlines point to the Mount. So if the Temple Mount is the target of the final war, we shouldn't be surprised when the crosshairs are already tightening, right? Every news cycle brings another warning flare from the epicenter of prophecy, Jerusalem. And this isn't theoretical anymore, it's active, and the pressure is mounting. I think of the red heifers, right? A countdown to ritual readiness. In a quiet corner of Israel, a biblically rare countdown is unfolding. At one time, 5 red heifers were flown in from Texas in 2022. Now, I believe there's only 2 that remain unblemished and ritually pure. But time is running short. They have to be, if memory serves correctly, they must be sacrificed before the age of 3.5, according to Numbers 19:2. And that window closes in early 2026. So the Temple Institute already has the priests trained, the vessels prepared, and the blueprints drawn. They could literally do this within 24 hours and have the temple ready to go. All that remains is ashes, the key to purifying the priests for temple service. Never in modern history has this combination of elements come so close to operational readiness. Another reason I can't believe people are falling for Satan's little season. Everything's pointing to Daniel's 70th week, not it being in the past, already having transpired. So daily tensions also surround the Temple Mount, with Jewish ascents increasing under police guard. Clashes erupt regularly, but here's the quiet shift most miss. In January 2024, a revived Sanhedrin began publicly lobbying for the restoration of sacrificial practices, invoking laws on ritual purity and laying groundwork for return to temple-era protocols. At the same time, calls are growing among some Knesset members to declare full Jewish sovereignty over the Mount, a move that would ignite regional chaos for sure, but also signals how close we are to a prophetic flashpoint, right? So the UN continues to pass resolutions denying Jewish connections to the Mount, even referring to it solely by its Islamic name, Al-Haram al-Sharif. In March 2025, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation renewed calls for a unified Muslim stand against any changes in Mount status. Meanwhile, world powers increasingly treat Jerusalem as the fulcrum of instability, just as Zechariah said. It'll be a burdensome stone for all nations. It's not just geopolitics anymore, it's a collision course with prophecy. So the fuse is lit, right? The pieces are not falling randomly, they're being aligned. Biblical elements like the red heifer are nearing fulfillment. Spiritual preparations like priesthood training and Sanhedrin decisions are quietly advancing. And geopolitical storms are swirling around a single hilltop. And the world, for the most part, is either asleep or provoking the storm. And the Mount of Assembly isn't just a theological idea anymore, it's a live wire, exposed, contested, and soon to be reclaimed. So my last note, I put prepare the way. So there it is. The mountain's always been the prize, not oil, not gold, not even the minds of men, though those come close. No, the fallen ones want what they've always wanted, Zion, the true Mount of Assembly, the place where heaven touches earth. It's like the crown jewel on everything, right? Yet, do they want to change us genetically, transhumanly, all of that to make us no longer human as one way to get rid of us and steal our birthright? Yes. But what good is it if you have no legal claim to the throne in Mount Zion, right? The true mountain of assembly, the place where heaven touches earth. In prophecy, it doesn't whisper, it shouts right now, doesn't it? The kings of the earth rage, the nations scheme, but the Lord laughs because he has set his king on his holy hill. So what do we do with that? Well, we stay awake. We keep watch, like we do on this program, Pilgrims Grey Chronicles. We remember that deception doesn't need to shout. It just needs us to grow tired of waiting and watching, to nod off, to get sleepy, to become apathetic or distracted, and to stop watching that hill. But the king is not delayed. He is coming to Zion, and not in metaphor and not in myth, but in full-on physical glory. So, with that being said, I want to thank Derek for his wonderful writing. I really found the article very interesting. That's why I wanted to do it tonight. Also, I wanted to let you know that I did an interview over the weekend, and it will be posted for next Monday's show. I think you're going to like it. It's with John Parsons, really great guy that runs a radio program. You'll get to see all of that next Monday. We had a really good time talking to him, and we went over multiple different subjects, and I spend some brief time at the beginning of the interview explaining who I am and where I come from and why I even decided to start doing this. I guess maybe I ought to do that more often, occasionally. I've only done it once or twice. But anyway, look forward to that next Monday. I think you'll really enjoy the interview. It's about an hour long because of the radio time slot. And he'll be posting it first sometime this week. I think the 20th, I think he said it was. And I'll be posting it Monday the 21st, I think. Yeah, 21st. So somewhere in that neighborhood, be looking for it. I'll remind you on Wednesday night and Friday night. Because I really want you to hear it. I really had a fun time, and it was a good discussion. And if you've listened this far, I really appreciate it, and I hope this stirred your spirit. And if it has, send it to someone who's asking questions, right? And subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Subscribe. It just takes 2 seconds to ring that bell or touch that bell. Leave us a 5-star review. To help grow the fellowship of wanderers and watchers. We're building something here, and you are part of it. Anytime you do even the smallest thing like that, it builds our community, right? And our outreach. And I want to reach people with truth in the things that I discover in the world. And if you want to be a part of that, then, we all work together synergistically to do such things, right? And so I appreciate all of you who do that and are already doing it and have taken the time to subscribe or leave a review or visit our store. And you can always find more at Pilgrims Grey Chronicles every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday night at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. I haven't done this in a while, but Monday, of course, is our primary show where you're going to get usually a longer show of an hour or greater in length, sometimes almost 2 hours long or more. Wednesday nights, I do listener emails, comments, and sometimes I'll do a special one like I did last Wednesday on Satan's Little Season because somebody did such a fantastic job of presenting their side, and it was very well put, well done, and polite. And I really appreciate that. And so I took time to respond to it, and I hope I was equally polite. And then Friday night, we do top 3 stories of the week. Some people really like that one. Some people don't listen at all. But I enjoy doing it because I like to keep up with what's going on in the world. And I try to relate it to the seed war. I don't just give news. I like to explain it in the context of Christianity, biblical filter, and the seed war that's ongoing until it finds its fulfillment again at Jerusalem in the Mount of Olives. So for now, the fire's gone low, right? The Watchtower has gone quiet, and the road that goes ever on is calling once more. So until next time, stay grounded, stay watchful, and remember the King is coming where? To Zion. So good night and Godspeed from Pilgrims Grey Chronicles, folks. See ya.
Hey! a tale of heroes who knew no fear. Through shadowed woods and mountains steep, their legacy lives where the wild winds sweep. Raise your tankards high and sing for the grey pilgrims and what they bring. To every corner their stories stay. Hail the chronicles of pilgrimsgrey. Through cursed lands where few would tread, the brave walk forth where many fled. Lanterns lit the endless night, their spirits burned a guiding light. Raise your tankards high and sing for the grey pilgrims and what they bring. To every corner their stories stay. Hail the chronicles of pilgrimsgrey. The laughter fades, yet echoes strong in every heart. Their timeless song, mirrors carried on the ale-soaked breeze. Songs as endless as the trees. Raise your tank.